What is up, everybody? Welcome into the inaugural episode of Faux Football. This is the real podcast about everyone's favorite fake sport, fantasy football. For my three fans, I want to say thank you for tuning in. And for any of those who accidentally stumbled into this podcast, I'm your host, Chu. You can follow me on Twitter or X, whatever it is now, at Father Dynasty. And check out the website, fatherdynasty.com, where you can find my Substack, also named Faux Football, and of course, this podcast and anything else I might be drumming up. So, a little about me, if you don't know me, which you likely do not, I've played fantasy football since high school. I won't let you know how long that is. And I'm someone who started out in redraft, as most people did, but was frequently leading the league in transactions throughout the year, ad drops, trades, that sort of thing. So stumbled into Dynasty fantasy football in 2018 with my first league. And needless to say, it was a revelation for me. It was a great way to be involved in fantasy football year round, have the same team, off-season trades, trade future picks. I'm a fiend for trading any of my future picks. Again, it's nice that we can go 3 years in the future, and they will likely be gone before we get to that point. But it's also a good way for me, as we get older, a good way to stay in touch with friends, uh, that sort of thing, as people are growing, moving, having families, jobs, that sort of thing. So this podcast overall will be me talking about redraft, talking about dynasty, and us collectively working towards those fantasy championships. On today's episode, we will be talking about four of the most traded players in Dynasty. And then I will also be touching on a couple of my favorite players to draft in the first 10 rounds of redraft. And that, of course, will be as of today, as of this recording, because I know we have probably about another 2 weeks or so, I guess a little less than that, until the NFL season starts. So if you're like me, I have, I think, 5 redraft drafts I still have to do between now and then. So likely a lot of you are waiting until now. You get past all the injuries in preseason, and you are getting ready for that fantasy football season for 2025. So immediately jumping into four of the most traded players in Dynasty, starting with the first, and this is me going off of the DynastyDaddy.com trade database. Tremendous tool, very helpful. Not necessarily really a fan of trade calculators, but it's nice in this case of having a trade database. You know, you can pick your parameters with the scoring and size of league, number of starters, that sort of thing. And while rarely is it ever a one-to-one comparison, you'll probably see some trades that just seem absolutely bananas. But it's nice, you can eventually see some trends where it's kind of getting like a general understanding of what the market would think about this player. Your league may be different than that, but it's good to just get an idea. And we'll start off with someone you may have heard of. He goes by Bill. Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt, of course, the now beneficiary of Brian Robinson now being traded to the 49ers, which I think is a tremendous deal for the Niners to get a dependable back behind Christian McCaffrey, who I do still believe has the juice and will be the RB1 this season anyway. So we're talking about JCM, as I will refer to him. So he, of course, is the rookie sensation this season. A lot of people were talking about him, certainly in the dynasty community, in the pre-draft process, before the NFL draft. He ends up going in the 7th round of this year to the Washington Commanders. At the time, it was behind Brian Robinson, Austin Eckler, Chris Rodriguez, I believe was there. Maybe they brought him back. And then Jeremy McNichols there as well. But JCM out of Arizona had an interesting kind of journey to get to this point. Started at Alabama State, went to New Mexico, finished off at Arizona, but then there were some eligibility issues in 2024. I think he played in one game, if I'm correct. So interesting way to get there. He is a little bit of an undersized back, but is a very shifty one. He is, however, already 24 years old. So yet another older back in his class. Shout out to RJ Harvey. Interesting to see. Probably one of the positions that is believed to have the shortest shelf life in fantasy, and have uh, a couple of running backs here in this class that are being so highly touted. Um, but overall, I think we can all collectively be excited for the prospects of JCM obviously getting touches. I think that's a given at this point. But what is his role really going to be? I do think that there is going to be some level of trust given to Austin Eckler. It's not just the contract he was given, but I think the role that he served last season, he did deal with some injury, but I think he served that role well, especially in this type of offense. Chris Rodriguez, I don't. I am weirdly a fan of Chris Rodriguez. I think he maybe has a fairly limited skill set, but I think he's good at that skill set, physical bruising back. And I think when you look at the three of them, no offense to Jeremy McNichols, but they each offer kind of different skill sets. And I think that's kind of how this is going to operate. I think Cliff Kingsbury would like to air this thing out, but I think there's an important role for the running back room in this offense. So I think we're gonna see that play out possibly in a frustrating way on a week to week basis. But who knows, as injuries pile up, one of these guys may take on a bigger role out of necessity or out of one sincerely just stepping up and being better. But for me, looking at two trades that I would kind of put my stamp on, whatever that's worth. So if you're trading JCM and if it's costing you either a 26 or 27 second, that's probably the most I would trade for him right now. I think there's still a lot of uncertainty in that backfield of what that's going to look like. Again, there's not a bell cow in that backfield. No offense to anybody that's been beating the drum for JCM this entire offseason. Or preferably, I mean, if you could do 2/3, I think that might be better. Another one involving some players, just kind of get an idea. JCM, Jordan Mason, and a 26 third for Quinshon Judkins. I thought that was an interesting one. This, of course, is on the heels of Judkins getting cleared of the charges that he had, but there's still some uncertainty with him in Cleveland, him being so far behind the eight ball, and some interesting upside with Merritt, and then you have Mason, who's being touted as a exciting backup who was traded to Minnesota behind a aging Aaron Jones. I do think Jones has still got the juice there, but of course, just one injury away, and I think there was already some talk. Even if Jones is healthy, you do have Jordan Mason stepping in for some goal line work, so that's pretty interesting there. So jumping over to the second player, the second of the four we've got, and that is George Pickens. He is, oddly enough, he is quite literally, I think, a month or so older than Jacory Krosky-Merritt. That's pretty funny. But looking at his last couple of seasons, he did finish not tremendously well. 35th in points per game, in fantasy points per game, 36th in fantasy points per game in 2023, 48th in fantasy points per game in 2022. Again, he's been dealing with atrocious quarterback play. That's not lost on me. But we now see him entering his best opportunity in terms of the best offense is in the highest passing volume, the best quarterback, all that kind of stuff. He is, however, going to be second fiddle to the clear number one de facto alpha in CeeDee Lamb. That's not going to change, obviously, but George Pickens does offer the best Robin to CeeDee Lamb's Batman since CeeDee Lamb had Amari Cooper. And I do think that this is, I do think there's a little bit of excitement for Pickens that's getting a little out of hand because he is going from being the number one in an offense, which again was pretty putrid, to the number two option. So I do think that his target volume and everything might be pretty comparable, maybe go up a little bit, but I do think that his catch rate and receptions and stuff, depending on where he's able to work out of with the routes and that sort of thing, I think might be a bit better for him. I assume he's going to be another 1,000-yard receiver. The touchdowns are going to kind of come and go. They can be a bit fickle, especially with that Cowboys offense. Again, we do assume it's going to be very pass heavy. The running back room is someone I like in Javonte Williams, but if we're not even sure that he's the number one there with Jaden Blue, Miles Sanders, who I think is going to stick with the team. So a lot of uncertainty there, but overall, optimism for George Pickens to at least be as good as he was as the alpha in Pittsburgh. Maybe better on certain weeks. But going over to two trades that I would recommend for him. So Pickens and a 26 second for Xavier Worthy. I would be hammering this all day, every day. Not a huge believer in Worthy. that's really actually independent of Rashee Rice and what's going on with that. I do think he can take a step forward this season. Again, entirely independent of Rice and what's happening with that. But I do think we saw what the Chiefs want him to be. And then we saw early in the season when Rice was there how Worthy would be used. Again, his rookie season, I get he can grow from that. But then we saw how Rashee Rice was used. And of course, a couple games in, then was hurt. So I think it's more just seeing enough of a track record with what they have in Rashee Rice. I don't. I'm much more of a believer in give me Pickens, give me that second, and I'd rather work with that as Pickens. I think can do as well, if not better, than Worthy in fantasy this season, and you can hedge your bets with a 26 second. And the second one here, Pickens and a 27 second for Jamison Williams and a 27 third. Again, it's another one for receiver, and I don't see a big enough difference in these two, Pickens and Jamison Williams. I'm going to just really pick this side with the second on it. So you're kind of bumping up one round, maybe not a full one necessarily, because these aren't the same team's picks, I don't believe. But that's kind of the idea. I think when you look at players in tiers, it kind of gives you, I'm not necessarily not paying attention to players, having my favorite players, my favorite offenses, that sort of thing. But when you can in trades, you jump up around and you get a player that you're probably about equal as comfortable with as the one you're trading away. I think that's a comfortable trade to make. You feel like you're not losing your butt on it. If anything, it would just kind of cancel out. Jumping over to the third player, we're looking at Calvin Ridley. So going a little bit older than George Pickens. He is actually 30. He'll be 31, I think, about halfway through the season. But I mean, former first rounder, the guy has the talent. He has done pretty well in Tennessee the last, I think it's 2 seasons that he's been there. And those last 2 seasons had been pretty similar. I think the main difference had been the touchdowns. So he got 8 touchdowns in 2023 to his 4 in 2024. There is a concern that, again, age is one factor, but I think it's pretty clear that he is the number one target there in Tennessee. We do have a rookie quarterback there, but it seems like there's been a pretty good connection thus far through camp in the preseason and such. So I think that this season, maybe next season, is kind of Ridley's final hurrah in the NFL. Not necessarily that he's going to retire, but in terms of his fantasy peak or most fantasy, his fantasy relevance, I guess we'll say, is probably going to be ending after this season, maybe next season. And there is actually a cap consideration. There's a very big drop in his dead cap after this season, after 2025. So there is a consideration of if they want to get younger at that position or they restructure the contract or that sort of thing. It would likely be after this season. So kind of a contract year for him. And again, as he'd be entering next year, what would eventually be his age 32 season at this time next year. I think he understands, I would imagine, that he's not going to be getting anything longer than, say, a 2-year deal at best, I would imagine. So for Ridley, a couple of trades here. Ridley for Najee Harris and 2026 third. And this trade was made after the alleged fireworks incident, or maybe, I don't think it's alleged anymore. I think it's just alleged as to what the actual impact of that fireworks accident was. I don't really know. It's super weird. It's been a weird camp for Najee Harris, but I think the big thing and the big takeaway is, the deal that Najee was given, independent of the possible fireworks incident and whatever that means for him, it was an okay deal, but I think it was pretty clear with where they drafted Amarian Hampton, the Chargers. Amarian Hampton is the number one here, but I think they're doing much like what they did last season, where think what you will about, say, a Gus Edwards and that sort of thing, but they did not want to just give the backfield to just one running back. They want to split it a bit, but it's also just because they want to run that much, and that's the Harbaugh way. But I think right here, we don't really know what's going on with Harris. I'd much rather take Ridley in what could be his final meaningful season for fantasy. And jumping over to the second one, we got Ridley and a 27 second for Jamison Williams. So funny that Jamison Williams pops up in 2 different players' trades. obviously for longevity, I mean, Jameson Williams, tremendously younger, tied to still a very good offense, good quarterback, and has a good role there. It's really just being able to have Ridley, so get what will likely be similar production. Ridley is the number one, Jameson Williams is the number two, and still getting a second in the future. These are very much trades that I like to do because you're hedging your bets. You're generally, when you're doing this, you're trying to figure out, am I competing? I'm getting production, but I don't want to give up too much flexibility. If you're able to match somewhat closely the production in this season or maybe next season with Ridley and get the second, I'm not saying the second by default turns into Jameson Williams, but technically if it did, then that would mean that you win the trade. But it's giving you flexibility. It's in 2027. People laud and talk about that being next big draft class. I think every draft class has impactful players. We don't know what it's going to look like until they make it to the NFL and actually start playing. So just gives you flexibility. It's a good thing to do. And jumping into the fourth player, Tyrone Tracy, big fan of him, converted wide receiver coming out of Purdue. He is going to be 26. So he's 25 right now, but going to be 26 just as we're getting into the season there. So he was 31st in fantasy points per game in his rookie season. The snaps really did pick up for him in week 5. It was, of course, Devin Singletary's backfield. He was the one with the decently sized contract after they let Saquon go. I mean, Singletary's wasn't massive, but obviously Singletary was expected to be the lead back there. He dealt with ankle injury a little bit later in the season, but did not miss a single game that I'm aware of. And while he did have some fumbling issues, I really think it was the timing of them that made this seem kind of hang in fantasy managers' minds a bit different. So again, dealt with an ankle injury, but stayed for the latter part of the season, but did not miss any games. 1 fumble in the first 9 games, did not lose the fumble though, and 4 fumbles in the remaining 8 games. 2 of those were lost fumbles. So I can understand how, especially in Giants fans' minds, of the horror of when there was fumbling issues with the Tiki Barber. I want to say David Wilson, shout out to fellow Hokie, had also had some fumbling issues as well at some point in his career. So I get it. Like, that's a very quick way for a running back to lose his opportunity, especially one who was a 5th round draft pick, converted receiver in college. Like, yeah, it's not like they invested a 1st round pick at this guy. I understand that. But he is dynamic with the ball in his hands. Again, a converted wide receiver, so he does have that skill set that it's not that he's a good pass catcher for a running back. He was literally a wide receiver, and I think a good one at that. So I think with Cam Scatterbo entering the fold, again, he was a 4th round draft pick instead of 5th, but I think that's a little watered down once you get in and start playing. I think the coaching staff, I'd imagine, doesn't look at Tracy and be like, yeah, he looks like a 5th round pick. It's like, no, he looks like an impactful running back. And I think Cam Scatterbo can be that as well, but I think at best Scatterbo is going to be the 1B and kind of like the thunder to Tyrone Tracy's lightning and 1A. And I think that's what you're seeing from a lot of backfields now. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think they're figuring out the quarterback position. I think Russell Wilson's going to be better than most people think, but this is going to be Jackson Dart's team for the future. Malik Neighbors, that sort of thing. Slayton, Wendell Robinson, a lot of these guys, Theo Johnson, pretty decent group there. But I think Tyrone Tracy is a very intriguing pick. And looking at 2 trades, it's Tyrone Tracy for a 26th third and a 28th second, and that's all for DeAndre Swift. I mean, that's, for me, it's a slam dunk. I understand it's a bit late of a second to be waiting till 2028. I love whenever we get into the drafts and it gives you the 3rd year of picks that refreshes. It gets me excited to be trading for or away, likely away, rookie picks that are 3 years from now. But DeAndre Swift, just say what you will about like the revamped Bears, and it does seem like DeAndre Swift it is his backfield. Again, not as a bell cow. I don't think that's what this is, but I'd rather have Tyrone Tracy. I don't even think you'd actually have to have both of those picks. I'd do it if it was just Tracy in the 3rd for DeAndre Swift or Tracy in the future 2nd. So for me, that's a pretty tremendous deal. And another one that I think is pretty interesting, Tyrone Tracy and a 26th first for Chris Olave. So I am a believer in Chris Olave. He's had his concussion issues, had his issues of just atrocious quarterback play with the Saints. I do think it's going to be a good season for him, at least if he's healthy. I think he can kind of have an impactful season. The problem is, I in no way believe in Tyler Shuck. I think it's going to be Spencer Rattler at some point, whether it be because Shuck gets injured, he's too scared when pressure comes to him, or what have you. I don't know, but I think buying too much in Chris Olave, as much as I do believe in him, have him on a team or two. I think when you look at this, much like I was talking about with some of the previous ones, this is pretty good in hedging. Like you get Tyron Tracy, you're getting points right now. I think people again are concerned about what is Scadbo going to do? Is he going to take touches away from Tracy? He will to a degree, but I do think this is still Tracy's backfield, even if it's a 60-40 split maybe. And you're getting a first next year. Again, I know people keep talking about, it's 2027, you want those picks. 2026 isn't maybe going to be as strong of a class. It's going to have players that are going to join the NFL, get drafted by teams, and play. So, in my opinion, I'm always of the mind that if you'd rather it be 27 first, sure. If the difference is, we'll give you 27 second versus 26 first, I don't know why they would do that. Like, just you get a first, you get Tyron Tracy, you're getting points now, you're getting a first for the future. Might be tough giving away Chris Olave, but I think if you look at the floor being, all right, the only way I'll trade away Chris Olave is for a first, and I'm getting Tyron Tracy, I think that's a pretty good deal. So, all of those, four of the most traded players in Dynasty, again, those are pulled off of dynastydaddy.com and their trade database. So go ahead and check that out. Very helpful tool. But jumping over to another thing that I was looking at here with the upcoming fantasy football drafts, and this is as of the last 2 days or so with some of these. This is ADP from Draft Sharks, looking at PPR, and you can pick PPR, sleeper, a couple of different scoring options and league options and that sort of thing. I'm going and looking at this as every round being in a 12-team league and picking one player from each round, not necessarily building a team, but independent of position and that sort of thing, picking the players that I think are the best buy low, so to speak, in each one. So for me, starting out in round one, Christian McCaffrey, his ADP is 12. Is staggering to me. I understand that he had his Achilles tendonitis issues. He went to Germany, got some German shit done to him, and now he's back to good old Christian McCaffrey. So we're hearing in the offseason. And everyone around him seems to be withering away. I mean, they again, as I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, they just traded for Brian Robinson. So, I mean, that doesn't really impact Christian McCaffrey. That just impacts the need to have depth at running back, as they so often need in San Fran. Usually you make it into the season before these guys start going down like flies, but here we are. Christian McCaffrey, I mean, he's entering his age 29 season. But so 8 seasons, and there's 3 of them he's played less than half the season. Again, injury and that sort of thing. I get it. So of those other 5 that he played, 4 of them he was top 2, and the other one he was the RB12. And as early as 2023, he was the RB1. So I don't think it's far-fetched to think that Christian McCaffrey has a range of outcome where he finishes as the RB1. And if I'm getting that at ADP of 12, if I'm picking at the back end of the first, and I'm obviously having the 13th pick, so the first one in the second round, I'm feeling pretty damn good about that. I love that all the way. I would pick McCaffrey even before 12, but the fact that if this is what is happening in your leagues, I feel good about that. I understand injury can always happen, but it can also happen to anybody. So that's worth the risk to me when you're getting to pick 12 there. So going over to the second round, going for a sophomore receiver, Ladd McConkey, ADP of 24. So he's, again, entering his age about to be 24 season, but sophomore season. And coming off a very good rookie year, 16th in fantasy points per game with 15.1. Got a pretty good schedule in 2025. Has a good rapport with Justin Herbert. Again, it's continuity with the offense, same head coach, that sort of thing going into this year. Always helpful with the offense, always helpful with young players. Even with the drafting of Trey Harris, addition of other players, bringing back of Keenan Allen, I'm not really concerned with what Ladd McConkey's role is going to be. I think it kind of grew a little bit throughout the season. And at a minimum, I think that you can see him do a lot of the same things that he did last year. And I do think this offense is going to take even a step forward this year. I feel like we say that about the Chargers for so many years at this point, and just injuries and just a lot of things happen. It ends up falling apart. I'll stick with saying I think it could sincerely happen this year. I do think they have the right coach at the helm for them. But again, I do think this is Lad McConkey. Lad McConkey is a PPR darling. He's a tremendously efficient player, a good route runner, and I think that he's a tremendous value getting him here at pick 24, which again that would be the end of the second round. So jumping over to the third round and going with a quarterback here in Jalen Hurts with ADP of 36. That's the last pick here in the third round. So I know there's been a lot of focus on it's Josh Allen, it's Lamar Jackson, understandably so. Of course, now Jaden Daniels. But in this scenario, we have Jalen Hurts being the fourth of the group of four quarterbacks I just mentioned to go. I'll just take the fourth of whoever falls. If I'm able to wait this far to the end of the third round, I'm not looking for a quarterback in the second round necessarily. But if I'm able to get one of those top four, no offense to Joe Burrow, but I would prefer some rushing upside, then I'm going to do that. I mean, what was seen as, supposedly a down year for him, I mean, from 2022, that was, of course, with him finishing first in fantasy points per game with 25.6. He finished second in 2023 with 21.9 fantasy points per game, and he dipped all the way down to 21.3 fantasy points per game last season, which was sixth. Of course, this was the Saquon Barkley show in 2024, understandably so. And I will say one good thing, the tush push is alive and well, at least as of now. And I do think that, Saquon's still there. That's not going to change. The same receivers are still there. It's Dallas Goedert still there. So there's a lot of continuity there. But I do think that even if we have the same imbalance of Saquon getting more touches, there's still going to be the tush push, or there's still a touchdown upside for Jalen Hurts. I do think that A.J. Brown did deal with some injury last season. He's a touchdown monster there. Devonta Smith, of course, is tremendous. I think there's a lot of upside for this offense, and I think it starts with Jalen Hurts. So I really like that pick here at the end of round 3. And jumping over to round 4, we've got Alvin Kamara at ADP of 39, so that's just 2 or so picks into the round. I know that he's a bit older. It's not lost on me, but this is going to be another, 1,200 plus all-purpose yards, probably, at least 6 total touchdowns. This offense is dreadful. It's rough. This could very well be the worst team in the NFL from a win-loss standpoint. That has never seemed to stop Alvin Kamara from producing at a tremendously high level. Again, like I mentioned, Christian McCaffrey playing 8 years, and Alvin Kamara's 8 years. He has only finished outside of the top 8 in fantasy points per game once. That was in 2022, not 2012. And that's where he was 13th. I like Alvin Kamara a lot. I understand his age. Again, I understand the offense, but you have a new head coach there, a new play caller. It's pretty clear who the playmakers are, and I think there's make no bones about it. Alvin Kamara is going to be fed the ball again, even if they're behind. He is a pass catcher. His tremendous PPR upside. Again, he's had such fantasy success in his career and never had 1,000 rushing yards in a season. It's because he is a PPR darling. He's going to get his 60 plus catches, barring some sort of injury. So I do think we're getting the last good bit of Alvin Kamara, and I'm taking that to the bank here in round 4. In round 5, going for another oldie but a goodie, and that is James Conner, ADP of 52. So that's another 3 or so picks into the 5th round. So steady, safe and steady wins the race. Slow and steady wins the race. Whatever, something steady wins the race, and that will be James Conner. Pretty steady in the last 3 seasons in terms of his fantasy finishes, 15th, 13th, and 9th, going from 2024 to 2022, all of which very much, within a full point, actually less than a full point per game for fantasy's sake. But to me, it feels like a pretty safe top 20 finisher. I think that's really exciting, especially when you're waiting until the fifth round to get that. Whether you only got one stud running back in the first round or two, or you waited till this point, ideally you're not waiting till this point. But if you had to, I think this is a pretty good place to start. He's a 30-year-old guy, but he's a do-it-all back in Arizona. They've already talked about the trust they have in him. He's tried to pump up Trey Benson. With all due respect, this is James Conner's backfield until he is done because of injury, or they just decide to move on from him contractually. But he, of course, is under contract this season. A tremendous player. I think a lock for top 20. I think an RB1 finish is well within the range of outcomes, or a top 15 finish. And I think if you're getting that in round 5, that is tremendous. So going to the next round, round 6, going with my favorite team, the Carolina Panthers, and that is their new number 1 receiver, Teteroa McMillan, ADP of 63. That's, of course, 2 picks into the 6th round. Good young receiver. I think that a wide receiver 2 finish is probably likely. I do think that it's going to be touchdown dependent with his opportunities that he's going to get. I do think they're going to be trying to be a bit more run focused this season. Last season, they had a historically bad defense, and it was kind of tough to commit to the run for too long. I think they'll have a better chance at doing that this season. But he is someone who can manage and handle a big target workload. Of course, his last 2 collegiate seasons at Arizona, 130 plus targets, 1,300, 1,400 yards, 8 or 9 touchdowns. Like, he can do it. He can work all over the field. I know there's been talks of a Drake London-esque, that sort of thing. I understand that, but I see him as someone who can kind of work all over the field. I think he has good run after yak ability, and I think as a red zone target is tremendously exciting, especially for a much more confident Bryce Young. So I'm very excited for all of this. And I think if you're able to get a number 1 target, albeit in a run first offense in the round 6, I think that's a no brainer for me. And a similar situation, not in age, but in idea. In round 7, Jacoby Myers. So he is ADP 82. That's towards the tail end of this, about 2 or so picks before the end of round 7. About to enter his age 29 season. He'll turn that here in a month or so. But he's coming fresh off of one of his better seasons, 14.5 fantasy points. It's 20th points per game, and had his first 1,000-yard season. Did it in 15 games. Did not play all of the games, but he's done gradually better in fantasy points per game every single season. I understand that may change a little bit. This is a new head coach. This is a new quarterback. Brock Bowers is still there. He was there last year, and that coincided with Jacoby Myers' best season. But you also have Ashton Genty. So again, there's a lot of moving parts. It's not lost on me. But I do think that, again, like Teteroa, I think Teteroa has higher upside. But I think Jacoby Myers, I think, is a very safe flex play. You're getting to round 7 at this point. Upside is maybe not tremendous, but I think if you want to have some level of security in the fact that Jacoby Myers is like Jack Bash, Trey Tucker, these guys are not taking Jacoby Myers' spot as the lead target getter there. I do expect Brock Bowers to exceed Jacoby Myers, but that's what happened last season, and he still finished 20th in fantasy points per game. So I like him there, and I'm a big fan of Geno Smith, so I would like to see him slinging the ball to Jacoby Myers. Going to round 8, got a couple more left here. Tyler Warren, the rookie tight end for the Indianapolis Colts, ADP of 91. That's about middle of the round of round 8. Monstrous final season in college. 31% target share, 1,200 receiving yards, 8 receiving touchdowns. And again, that was only mentioning his receiving work. He's a rusher as well out of the backfield. Again, just an overall weapon, freak of nature. And I think that he is going to immediately become a favorite target for the newly anointed QB1 Daniel Jones. I do like Michael Pittman. I do like Josh Downs, who I believe is dealing with some injury to enter the season. Jonathan Taylor, of course. So, I mean, there's other players there. There's other options, other weapons. But I do think, draft capital means a lot. And where they picked Warren there, I think that they're immediately going to utilize him. Before it was, we've got Jack Doyle, we've got Mo Alley Cox, we've got was it Granson, I believe, at one point. Tyler Warren is not any of those guys. He is in a league of his own. He's a tremendous athlete, weapon, great hands. I think he's going to be a very exciting upside fantasy play again, 8th round. So if you didn't pick one of the first big 3 or big 4 or so, Tyler Warren's a very good get. So 2 more rounds here. We've got round 9, Emeka Egbuka, another rookie, ADP of 101. That's just about midway the ninth round. Had a very decorated collegiate career, and now he joins the Tampa Bay Bucks. Initially, a team thought of, well, they're pretty set at wide receiver. Well, they are, but Godwin is still coming back from his injury. I think he's going to be on the 53-man roster, but of course, it's still being worked back. That's understood that it's going to happen. It's not like he's going to start week 1. You do have Mike Evans already there again, but both of those guys, Godwin and Evans, are getting a bit older. I think it makes some sense, although I thought it was kind of silly at the time, but Mecca Ibuka steps in, and by all of the accounts of training camp and that sort of thing, it's sounded pretty good for him. So I do think he's going to step in and have an immediate impact for them. Again, he's not going to be the wide receiver 1 that is Mike Evans's role, even if Godwin is not coming back yet. And once Godwin comes back, does Egbuka take a step back, or does he have some sort of role? I don't know. But I think at a minimum for the beginning of the season, he'll be the second option in that offense, a pass-heavy offense, one where I could easily see Baker Mayfield leading the league in passing yards and attempts probably. So a good guy to get at this point. And last but not least, one of my favorite players going into this season, especially at his value, and that is Tucker Kraft. So in round 10, it got an ADP of 114. That's about midway through this round 10. He's entering his 3rd season. Had a tremendous jump. I think more than doubled his fantasy points per game from 2023 to 2024, where he finished 14th last season. But another big thing about how he did it, he was the tight end 1 twice in 2024. Actually, I think it was in back-to-back weeks. And he had 4 other top 12 weeks. So I know the tight end position can be a bit fickle, and it can be one that is streamed just as much as defenses are streamed if you don't have, again, one of the top 3 or top 4 guys. But I'm not super high on Matthew Golden. I do think they're going into the season with him being the wide receiver 1. But overall, I think they have something to sort out there. But what I do think there's a constant is the connection with Jordan Love and Tucker Kraft. Tucker Kraft, a true downfield threat, a dynamic player with the ball in his hands. I think that you could see that carryover of having some more finishes inside the top 10, top 12, even probably more than last season. And without maybe a clear-cut wide receiver 1 or the targets being spread around, I think that it's not silly to think that Kraft could be the second, get the second most targets in this offense. And even if it's 3rd, I think there's enough touchdown upside to where he is the one to get this late. Again, round 10, pretty good ADP here. And that is going to do it for this week's episode. I want to say thank you to everybody for tuning into the inaugural episode of Faux Football. Looking forward to many, many more throughout this season. And before I officially end this, I do want to give a shout out to my son, Finn. He just finished his first week of first grade, and he has his first flag football game coming up. I am the assistant coach, and excited to see how that's going to go. Part of me just hopes they can snap the ball and not fumble it, but I'm setting the bar there, and we'll see how it goes. But thank you again for tuning in, and please subscribe to the Faux Football Substack and the podcast, of course, which is what you're listening to right now. You can find all of that at fatherdynasty.com, or for the podcast, of course, that would be wherever you're listening, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, that sort of thing. And any thoughts on it, let me know what you think about the episode on Twitter or X at Father Dynasty. And I'll catch you on the next one.